Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vicki Poole, and I'm going to be reading some to make sure that I don't leave any of this wonderful information out. But I'm a life coach, a health coach, a hypnotherapist. My business is called The Enlightened Peach. And this podcast is all about embracing our mosaic life. Some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life? It is recognizing that all the pieces of our lives, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I will be your host, and I will have a special guest from time to time. As a matter of fact, I have a wonderful guest today I'll be introducing in just a minute, and I'm so excited. So if you have any ahas or questions, please leave a comment or a voice message. So now let's get started. So I want to say that the way I met this wonderful person is we were in a group class together, and she put a post up that it was like, I need to speak to this person. And so I immediately reached out, and she was so kind to reach back out. And we've had a conversation before today, and it was like, I even wish I had recorded that conversation. It was so amazing. So let me tell you about Breanne Moore. And she's a divine, and let me move this around so I'm not looking so far over there. And I'm going to have some words that I'm not going to be able to pronounce, and that's okay. So I'll just ask her to step in. But she is a feminine intimacy and fertility guide. She specializes in SA trauma, generational patterns, DID with walk-ins, and CPTSD. She consciously homeschools her 3 sons with her husband, which we may hear the sons periodically through here. She's been married to her husband for 25 years. She comes from a long line of Midew. Did I say that right?
Menwi.
Okay. Medicine people of her native tribe, the
Potawatomi.
She most recently moved to Oklahoma to reconnect with her indigenous roots and hear her generational trauma, which we're going to hear about so much of this stuff. And it's not to say that it's a wonderful thing that she went through it, but it's definitely fascinating. She received her life coach and meditation certification from the Chopra Center in San Diego, California. At the Chopra Center, she was introduced to Ayurveda, which I love Ayurveda, and decided to further her education at the
Kerela
Ayurveda Academy in LA. She's a certified Ayurvedic counselor, and she's also certified Theta healer. So she's got a lot of education behind her and a lot of life behind her. That is really what we're going to be talking to her about today. She is, for those of you who do not know what some of that means, she does have multiple personalities that have developed in her life from different traumas. So let's just start with, tell me, a little bit about how you've dealt with the trauma, with the personalities, and when you first had a personality, and how did you know that had happened?
Actually, I didn't really realize that I had the personalities until maybe 6-7 years ago.
Oh,
I mean, I
wow.
knew that my life was very different. I knew that I had a lot of trauma. I didn't really realize that those voices in my head were different people, were different than me. They were separate from me until I started really going through my trauma and breaking it all apart and meeting with those people. So I didn't really know until not that long ago, but I kind of always did know, I would say, because as a little kid, I knew that. So I explained my first time that one stepped in. I was 4 years old, and it was a very traumatic, very brutal I don't know if you should say trigger warning to people, but it was a very brutal rape. And while I was laying there, my arm was dislocated, and the pain was so great that I was probably going to either die or something had to step in. And so all I remember is being floating above my body and feeling like in so much incredible pain. And then all of a sudden the pain went away and this light came into me, and my first walk-in appeared. She does this walk-in actually is related to me. She's my great 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 grandma. And so later on she would explain it to me. She would come out of me in my bedroom and explain the whole thing to me, but I didn't really understand until maybe just like I said 7 8 years ago, because it was such I was so little, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of pushed it away as I got older, like, oh, these things happened to me as a kid. You couldn't talk about it, any of this. I couldn't talk about any of my trauma. So I definitely couldn't talk about any of my personalities. And I wasn't put in therapy by anyone because we weren't allowed to talk about our trauma because it
Right.
was all intertwined in the family. So you couldn't go to therapy. So there was no one to talk to. And if I did go to a therapist, it was through church or something like that. And it wasn't safe to talk about it. So that was the first time that I really had an experience with it. And then almost every time that I had an extreme brutal sexual encounter, I would have another walk-in. And I didn't really, like I said, when I started breaking through all my trauma and going through each time that I had remembered, um, they would come out, and then I sat with them and I'd start to we would have conversations. And I as I went through my spiritual journey, I learned that, you know, so it's so interesting. It's quantum physics basically,
Mm-hmm.
but like when a baby is conceived, you have the egg and the sperm, and when they go inside, there's the zinc spark, which is the spark of light that comes in, and that's when the soul comes in. And in order for that soul to come in, it has to have an energy and that's attracted to the soul that's in wherever we want to say, and that soul can come into that energy. Well, it's the same thing with a walk-in or a personality. For me personally, I don't know about other people, but for me, every time a walk-in came in, they had the same energy that I had at that moment. So they were attracted to it and they were allowed to come in. And that's how
Okay.
they come
So you
in the
mean at the moment
darkness.
of the trauma or the
Yes.
moment of inception?
No, the moment of the trauma.
Okay.
I'm just explaining it as because of that's how they've proven now, like
Okay.
in quantum physics, is that spark. So it's the same thing. It's my energy field put out an energy, like the law of attraction, right? That I needed to be saved, or I was going to probably physically die, because they're pretty horrendous ones. Is when they come in, there's just a lot of pain, and so instead of dying, you ask to be helped, and I asked to be helped, and this entity, or person, soul, whatever, can come in, and they can come in and be your protector. They put up all the shields for you. They hold that space for you. And you hold your trauma anywhere in your body where it happened, right? Like at
Right.
that time my arm was dislocated. I still have that little girl. She still talks to me through that shoulder a lot of times, because she that's where the pain was. That's where the severe pain was. So it's like they come in, they walk in, and you have a contract with them, probably from a past life. Obviously my great great grandma, that's generational, so she stepped in as my first one. The other ones that I've had contracts with them in past lives, probably paying off karma or anything like that. And they're here to pretty much keep my system going, because my system is in such shock still, even to this day, from all the trauma, that they're there anytime something's triggered. They step in. So like the most of the time we see them when like I'm going through something, like that has any kind of you know trauma trigger or anything like that. That's when they'll step in, and they'll help me be able to cope with it. But then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes not cope with it, because they're all going at the same time. So
Yeah.
it can be a little over, and I have to spend a lot of time um, every morning, like finding out who I am, like who am I today? You know, like, and can I just be Breanne today? It used to be that I don't think I had really any control over it before I realized really what it was. They would just come and go and come and go. There's a lot of parts of my life where I don't remember anything. And
I
my
was just about to ask you, and
yeah,
when they stepped in, is it like I've seen different educational things about this, and it seems like a lot of the census is that it's just like a
yeah,
blackout, and
yeah.
they're not aware of anything that's going on. So is that how it happens with you as well?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay.
But as I've gotten older, I would say I'm getting better at it. And now that I have more of a communication with them, and that I kind of know when they're stepping in, and it's very interesting. The hard part is that when they step in, and if you're in a situation where they want to take over and they have control, they'll be saying something out of your mouth and you're like, you don't want to say it, but you have no control to not say it. So that's that's where the hard part comes in. And when you start to
Yeah.
heal, you have that a lot more, because their story contradicts your new story that you're writing about yourself. And so that was like the post that I posted on that one, was that I was letting one go, and our contract was up as far as I was concerned, because she could not serve me anymore. And I couldn't serve her anymore, because she was very angry, and we went through as much as we could together. But I think I told you on the thing, she's 17 years old, and her name is Victoria, and she's from England. And not nowadays though, way I would say like the
Okay.
1800s. She
Mm-hmm.
obviously had some same trauma as me. That's how she was able to come into me at the time that she did. She came into me when I was 16 years old, and it was the last time that I was raped. And so she had been the front person for me literally all my teenage years and my marriage forever. And she's not does not want to have kids, or doesn't like kids, and doesn't really like men. She does not like men really at all. So me and my husband hit heads a lot, and the majority of the time it was her, and I didn't even know that until I started going through all of it. And he would tell me, but you said this to me, and I'm like, I did. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't remember. And some of the things that she says are horrible. And that's very hard when you're trying to keep a relationship going. And thank goodness we've been able to like work through it. But he's had to like also go, okay, well, that wasn't her, even though like I said horrible thing. I mean, horrible things. And so not that long ago, we were talking, and she was out, and he was like, I really don't like you. You really need to leave. And that was then shortly after was when I posted. I was like, you know what? He's right. She's not serving me anything, because she is very angry still. And I can't get past, like, I have no control over what she says. You know, like when she comes in, she's just boom, and she's very to the point, and she's very like just not me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, I don't know if you've ever had those dreams where you're like trying to scream and no one
Yes.
can hear you. That's
Yeah.
what it feels like, because
Okay.
I'm trying to say stop it, or I'm trying to like say no, I don't want that, but you have no control over it. Like they just talk and they just say things, and then you're afterwards you're like, I'm so sorry. And my
Mm-hmm.
11-year-old, the same thing, like he gets the brunt, I would say the brunt of it. So I just finally had to sit down and have a very like deep conversation with her, and we just discussed that it was time for her to go, and that I would let her go. And for me, I that's the way. Now I don't know, that's probably not how most people that have DID will ever do it, but for me as a spiritual person, and knowing that these souls that are in me are someone else separate from me and some other soul, I can let them go
Mm-hmm.
if I don't need them. If they believe that I am safe, they will go also. That's the key. They've
Mm-hmm.
always shown me what I need to see when they feel that I'm safe and protected. And so when I'm healing and safe and protected, and doing my work, um, then they'll go. And so that's what I've done. And
So
she's
let me
the
ask you real quick. One of the
only,
things So you're saying that once you became aware of all of this and were able to have conversations with them, when they would take over, you're just kind of sitting back and you're able to see it, you're able to hear it, you're not blacked out anymore.
No, yeah, no more.
So you just kind of feel like you're out of control. There's something else that's in control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, before that, I would just black out. I just wouldn't remember anything. But I think with the healing is where that all comes. When you finally like sit and go, okay, well, I have this. And what am I going to do about it? Like, I can't live my life like in this crazy way where I don't remember what I said. And like, oh, I mean, I thought my life, because of how much they, black you out, I really looked at my life and it was very easy for me to go, oh my gosh, my childhood was perfect. you know, well, very well knowing that I'm being abused severely by my relatives and like I should have been like, oh, my life is not perfect, right? But they did a very good job of protecting me. That is their job. Their job is to protect me, and I will forever be grateful for that. That I'm still alive, that I made it through what I made it through. But at a certain point, they're not hopefully not gonna serve me if I've healed. Like
Right.
if I'm healing, if I'm doing the work, then they don't need to be here, or they can be here like I have. My great grandma, she's there, she's always there, she will not leave. I do believe that she probably was meant to be like more of a guardian originally, but then because of the trauma, she chose to step in. um she's not leaving, but
Yeah.
she lets me make my decisions in my life, and she's there to like give me, you know help me if I need her to, but she's
Right.
not leaving. But the ones that don't serve anymore and that they're not really gonna go past a certain point either, like the 17-year-old is not going to change the way that she feels about children, I don't think, anytime soon, because she's already now experienced me having three, and she hasn't changed, like she
Right.
still doesn't like them. And so she has to go, she had to go,
Right.
and so, but I think it's when you heal, a lot of people think that maybe DID or schizophrenia or any of these ones that you can't heal. But I believe, because of my experience, that you can heal it, that it's that they're there to protect you, but that they don't have to be there. We have to tell them to leave, but they don't have to stay. It's totally up to us. That's what I believe because of my experience. I believe that they they don't have to come, they don't have to stay if you don't want them to,
Yeah.
and they don't have to be at the forefront either. If I'm not in fight or flight, I'm Breanne, like I'm me. If I get triggered, or if I'm any place that's not safe or anything like that, that's one thing you will see. If I don't feel safe, I very much carry myself a completely different way. Like, I have always been known as the kind of like the rough and tough kind of person, but that
Hmm.
wasn't me. That was like, one of my personalities. She's gonna fight. She is a fierce fighter, you know what I mean? And so you'll notice that kind of stuff. Like, you notice, like, if I don't feel safe, I definitely carry myself different, because I'm gonna protect myself, but it's not really me, it's someone else protecting me.
So
So
it's
it's
kind of
very
like an extreme case of parts work, basically.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
I
And a lot
love
of people,
parts work.
yes, and a lot of people think like, well, that's what it is. And I kind of did at first, until I was more heavily diagnosed, I guess, and
Hmm.
sat with my therapist. And but at the same time, she kind of goes back and forth. She's like, you've done so much work, and there's not a lot of people that do that kind of work that have DID, right?
Hmm.
There's not a lot of people that go and sit with themselves at the darkest point of their life, and then commune with all of these people inside of them, and try to find the light in it. And
Yeah.
that's what I've done, because that was the only way to survive, I think, for me. And I honestly believe, though, that what happened to me in my childhood was for a reason. That I chose it. Like, I think I told you on the call last time, like,
Hmm.
I think I chose to have these, and I call them my spiritual teachers. Like, they've taught me a lot. And so I can't really look at it bad, even though it sounds like I tell people that I have it and they're like, well, I've known you your whole life and you don't, like, that's not possible. And I'm like, well, I'm really good at it, obviously. I don't know, like I'm really good at lying and I'm really good at manipulating and I'm really good at all of these things that are not my character, but they're all my, multiple personalities. They
Yeah.
do a great
Yeah.
job of it.
So let's kind of go back a little bit because I know you said your first experience was at 4, and I know you probably don't want to get into particulars about certain things and all, but I know from our conversation before, it was something that was generational in your family.
Yeah.
And it was all around the religion that you were in, if I'm remembering correctly.
A
Correct?
lot of it does have to do with, yeah, the
Yeah.
way I was raised in the Mormon religion. Well, there's lots of names for it nowadays, but I was raised in it. I came from a long line of them that was with the original Joseph Smith. They were pilgrims. They came to Utah. They did the whole, like, if you could look at the stock, it's like, oh, yay, we're good Mormons. But what people don't talk about in the Mormon religion, like active people, is that Joseph Smith was a polygamist and he married many young teenage girls and he took them from their families, and it's very well documented that all of the men that he surrounded himself with did the same thing, and my family was a part of that. And so it's very, very much generational, like the patriarchy in the Mormon church is huge. You do not go against the patriarchy. And so when my great grandpa started with me, it had been going from, my mom and, you know, it just passes down generation after generation because we don't talk about it. You're not
Right.
allowed to talk about it. And you're just being a good, you're doing what the patriarch of the family wants you to do. They're very, very good. They know exactly they've done it for so many years and so long that they know exactly what to say to make you believe that they love you and that they're doing what's right for you and that that's what God wants. I mean, the whole thing is that, and you don't really have anyone to go to because it's so deep. So I'll tell you one thing I learned when we moved to Utah. None of this happened in Utah. I was raised in California, but we decided to move to Utah, like, I think like 9 years ago. We moved to Utah, and I knew that when we were moving that something huge was going to happen. It was like we're moving here for a reason. And the second I stepped foot into what they call Utah Valley or Happy Valley, which is hilarious because no one's happy there, there's this energy there. It's so dense. It is, you feel it. And it is one where the patriarchy is over everything and the women are scared and the women are hurt. And I felt it right away and I connected to it right away. And I knew that when I was there, that was the purpose. I was connecting to my ancestors who had went through all of this trauma, who kept it going. And that was when I really sat down and started going through all of it and realizing like what it had done to me and how my family, who's all in Utah now, they all live in Utah now, none of them will talk about it. None of them will acknowledge it. If I say this, they'll just be like, well, it happened to so and so, and that's their reasoning. That's what women do in generational trauma, is they kind of, it happened to me, so it's okay that it happens to you type of
It
mentality.
becomes just that's part of normal process.
Yes. There's no empathy for you because it happened to them. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like, well, it happened to so and so, so it is what it is. You'll be okay. Look at, I'm okay. But then I look at all my aunts and my grandparents, like all of them, and none of them are happy. And I'm thinking, well, none of you are happy. So why, like, I have to do something different. And that was when I decided, like, I have to do everything different than what they did because what they're doing didn't work.
Right.
We're not healed as a family. We're not producing the best, children either because they're just going down line. I don't want my kids to go through the same thing that I went through. Just like I'm sure my mom didn't want me to go through the same thing, but yet she did not stop it. She did not protect me. She did not do anything. She actually facilitated and made it really easy because she was so disassociated because of all the trauma that she didn't see it. You know what I mean? It's just impossible to see because you're so disassociated. And the last time that I really realized that was I let my son, my oldest son, he was about 1 year old, sit on my grandpa's lap. And I didn't even think anything about it because I was so disassociated from all the trauma that had happened to me that I was like, well, here's this old man, he's about to die. I should let my, kid meet him. And afterwards I was like, why would I let my son meet this horrible man? You know what I mean? But we're so programmed to be like, well, he's the patriarch. You should all want to see him. You should all want to like think that he's a great man, that I kind of believed it. You know what I mean? And I also believed that he loved me forever, like, oh, well, he would never hurt me. He loved me. I had major Stockholm syndrome from my grandpa and my aunt because of all the abuse that they did. And so I never saw that until I started like healing everything and going through it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long road when you come from that kind of trauma to try to heal, because I don't think that you're really healing just for yourself. You're healing all the generations. In Native American, they believe that you heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So like, I feel like, okay, I'm doing this for like my past and my future. Like I'm doing it for everyone. And if my family doesn't want to come along for the ride and they want to like say it didn't happen or act like, whatever, that's fine. But I have to do it for like my kids and me and, so.
Yeah. So, just a quick question. Have you ever done past life regression or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. I've done it a few times. And that's where I've learned like certain parts of
Okay.
the souls that are in me have learned where they came from.
Were
In
you
my
able to cut
interactions
some
with them.
cords and everything when you went through that process?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because I've had walk-ins. Um, Now that I like look back at my life and stuff, I've had walk-ins that have come in that just stay for a little bit. They're not necessarily for me, really. They kind of more use me because I am so, I think, open to it, that they kind of use me. There's a good and a bad to that. So every time I've ever had a walk-in come in, it's usually at a very dark, like that stayed with me there. It's at a very dark time, right? So if there's a very dark energy, there's a very dark entity that can attach to you. So I've always had dark entities attached at the same time as the other one. And they usually have to go to, it's kind of funny. Like when I look at it, I think of it like kind of as a cartoon where like the entity that's the bad entity and the good entity, they have to go to war like inside of me and decide who's going to be in position. And there are times when those dark entities have been able to take over me for sure. And I've had to have some cast out. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of past life because
Okay.
I
I
think
do
that it
that
does.
with, I'm a hypnotherapist. And so
Yeah.
I do some past life regressions and stuff. And it's amazing to me, the things that people can see in their past lives. So I was just really, really
Yeah.
curious all of a sudden about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And I know that a lot of my trauma, because it's generational, I also know that a lot of my past lives I've lived with I've had quite a few past lives with my mom where we went through the same exact patterns over and over again. And I vowed that this is our last lifetime together. I told her, I'm like, I'm not doing this with you again. Like we're not going through, we're healing this. We're not doing it again. My husband, I've had several past lives with my husband, and with the most of the walk-ins, there's some kind of past life contract that was written for them to come in, which is so interesting because you're just like, well, how do you, but we're multiple, places at one time, really.
Right.
So
Right.
it's all running at the same time, really, and it's
Yeah.
so fast.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go back to, I know the first major trauma was when you were 4, and it sounds like it was pretty intense. And I would imagine at 4, it would be no matter what, because you don't know what the hell's happening and stuff. So can you think back from there? How did your as you said, great grandfather, right? How did he preen you for that? Do you remember that? or is that something you remember from later on?
Actually, that was not my first encounter.
Okay.
Sexual encounter. My great grandpa was my first sexual encounter. That was maybe not that much sooner before, but it wasn't traumatic per se. It was definitely, I would say, ritualistic, because my mom says that almost the very same thing happened to her that she can remember. But it was at a wedding. I'm the youngest. There's a big separation. Like, there was a whole bunch of cousins, and then I was the youngest for a while, and then there was like a gap, and then there was a whole bunch of younger cousins, like with my brother and sister. So I was the smallest at the time, and there was a wedding, and I was walked down a hallway. It was at a Mormon church, and I was walked down the hallway by my great grandma. She held my hand all the way. She walked me into what they called the nursery, which is like where the little kids area is. No one was in there. My great grandpa was in there, and she handed me a doll, and she sat me on his lap, and she walked out. And everything from that is pretty much, what you expect was going to happen. And it was very, I wouldn't say it was super, it was painful and confusing, but also like not traumatic, where
Mm-hmm.
the next event was very traumatic. It happened. They both walked me, like, she waited by the door. Like, that's how this kind of
Wow.
thing, she waited by the outside the door. I came out. They both walked me back down the hall, and I remember going, and I was in the wedding, but it was like the reception, and I remember going and hiding behind, like, they have big stages there, and I hid behind one of the curtains for I don't know how long, like, just in shock, I guess, not really knowing what was going on. And that was it. And then the next time was the pretty brutal one, and it wasn't by a family member. I was given to someone that was high or up in the church, and it was at a Christmas party. It and I was taken into an office again. That this time I was taken, and to be honest, I don't remember if I was taken by my aunt, my great aunt, or if I was taken by my great grandpa at that time into the office. And I'm more than happy to go into it, but it's kind of brutal. So I don't
Yeah,
know if
no, you don't have to, because
okay.
that's not important.
Yeah.
Well, not for this.
Yeah.
It's not. It is important, but
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to see if, because I know a lot of pedophiles preen their targets by giving them gifts and doing all these different things that make them feel special, and
Mm-hmm.
then it just kind of develops. So I didn't know if it was something that you were preen to do, but it looks like you were ceremoniously just here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It was just more young, like young and kind of like, this is just, I guess, going to happen. It
mm,
wasn't really like gift giving. Now, I did receive gifts like a little bit later on from my aunt, who was definitely kind of more, if you want to think of like someone that's going to program you or make you feel a certain way, it was definitely her. And so she was kind of the one. I'm pretty sure that she did it to obviously many of me and my cousins, but no one will talk about it. But she would give us gifts, but she would also do it in such a way that was like, I was a heavier set like girl, at that time, like when I was younger. Obviously I had a lot of trauma, and I emotionally ate
yeah.
a lot. And she would buy me like candy, but then make me step on a scale and tell me how fat I was. So like it was very weird. And then like she would take me to a jewelry store, and I would have to get her jewelry by like doing something with the person that owned the jewelry store. And then she would give me a piece of jewelry. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, well, here's your gift. But really it's all about like them just making you feel like that they love you so much that it's, that this is what you do, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
And at a certain point, I guess I just numbed out so much that I was pretty easy to control, because
yeah,
I think if you do it at such a young age, you're just really easy to control, because you split so soon. Like, personality, multiple personalities, it's just splitting, right? So like you split so soon. They split me like at such a young age that I was disassociated all the time, you know. So
Right,
like
right.
they knew that most of the time Breanne was probably just going to numb out and be like no big deal. And when she comes back to consciousness, she's going to be, you know, this little girl that's just going to do whatever we say that she's going to do.
Right.
And I was really good at that, I guess. I mean, I was really, and what also happens because of that is you become overly sexualized. And so, and because the most religions, but I would say the Mormon church really hammers in, don't have sex until you're married, right? Don't have sex until you're married. Like every time you go to church and I'm having sex before I'm married, you feel so much shame and guilt and whatever. You're never going to say anything because
Yeah.
God is going to punish you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And your abusers know that too. So they're like, you know, don't say anything because God, like you did this. You did. I don't know how many times I heard like, well, you wanted this.
Mm.
Okay. Well, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So there's things that
Yeah.
they know how to say so that
You
and it's
feel
only
so
because
much
they've done
shame.
it.
And a lot, I
Yeah.
know for a lot of people that have had not necessarily this experience, but experience where a family member or something has inappropriately touched them or done things that they feel like that nobody's going to believe them anyway.
Yeah.
So why say anything and open yourself up to all this challenge of trying to tell what your story is because nobody's going to believe you anyway.
Yeah. Well, the first time I told my mom I was 6, and it was after another really bad time had happened. And she knew something was wrong. She kept saying, like, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And so I told her that it was my cousins, which that had happened too, but that incident wasn't just my cousins. You know what I mean? I couldn't tell her that it was my uncle. I couldn't do that because that would be like, you'd get in trouble. So like, I just said my cousins. And that was the safest thing for me to say at the time. And so I did. And she basically said, well, that happened to them. So that's probably why they did it to you. And that was the end of it.
Oh.
There was
Mm.
no anything. There was no, and she said she would take, and when I asked my dad, you know, like, well, how come you guys didn't? And he goes, I asked your mom, and your mom said, it's my family. I'm going to talk to my family. I'm going to get to the bottom of it, whatever. And then it was never discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like my parents just, you know, my dad trusted my mom was going to take care of it. And my mom didn't want to take care of it because she didn't want to like make anyone look. We had a very specific, we look like a good family type of thing. And this was not going to fit that. So
Right.
she didn't do anything. So at 6 years old, I learned, okay, if I tell her, she's just not going to say
Nothing's going
anything.
to happen. Yeah.
Nothing's going to happen. So I just didn't say anything anymore, you know? And then I became pretty much like addicted to sex in a lot of ways, you know, like at a very young age, because I needed the dopamine and all of those things that come from having an orgasm at a young age, like that. And it's all because it was just, I was overly sexualized at such a young
Right.
age. And that makes you feel so horrible because in the church they tell you how bad you are. So like it was like a total circle of like, I'm never
Yeah.
getting out of this unless I like sit in it and figure it out, you know,
Yeah.
because
The
the
trauma
shame,
loop.
yes, the
Yeah.
shame
Yeah.
and everything that they got you in is just so
Yeah.
strong.
And I know from when we talked before too, and you just touched on it just a little bit, that from the outside, your family looked like they were the pillar of the church and everybody was happy and, you know, and your personalities helped you to step into that role, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, I was such a good kid. You know, I hung out with all the adults because I was so mature, you know, but it's not by choice, but like that was what happens, you know. And I never got in any trouble. I did exactly everything that they wanted. You know, I was so afraid of getting in trouble for some reason, but yet I was so angry because, you know, when the personalities step in, like they're angry. And so I hated my mom, but I never understood why I hated her. Like, you know, in this personality, why this personality hated until I started going through all the work because, well, you know, that's why, because she just sat there and was, you know, and I know most of her stuff is so subconscious because she hasn't done any of the work that she doesn't see herself in it. She doesn't see herself at all. She doesn't think that she did anything wrong. She doesn't think that anything like whatever happened to her, she doesn't want to deal with it at all. She'll just say her thing is I'll find out about it when I die. You know, like I don't want to remember anything. I don't want to deal with it. So she just let it all happen. And we had to have this look like, oh my gosh, we're so great. And I think that that's where the big thing is like, instead of going, oh my gosh, like this is messed up and, you know, I can't believe these things are happening. Let's try to deal with them. It's more like everyone still just wants to look like they're perfect, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because that's very much a society probably in a lot of organized religions, but in the Mormon church, looking like you're doing great and happy and like everything is great is the goal, you know? Like Utah County, where I lived for the short amount of time, they have some of the highest uses of like antidepressants, like in the nation. But yet everyone goes to church and said everyone's supposed to be super happy. They act like they're super happy, right? But all the women are on antidepressants, all of them. You won't find a woman that's not on something because there's just so much trauma
Right.
embedded in it. And it comes from the teachings, like the main leader of the, you know, church, that's what he did, and it gets passed down. And that's where generational trauma, like people just don't understand that. Well, they think, oh, well, that didn't happen to me. Like I wasn't sexually abused, but like maybe your relatives were up the line, and they don't understand that that holds coding in your DNA, and
Right.
it can keep going if you don't heal it. You know, even though you might not have walked in that thing, you're still feeling it.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I know it's kind of related and unrelated at the same time, but there have been experiments with animals to where they could teach an animal to be fearful of something that they really shouldn't be fearful of. But the interesting thing was the next generation would also be fearful of that thing that they are not naturally fearful of. And it would go several generations where these animals would just naturally have this fear that is not indicative of them, and that's fascinating. But that's the same thing with us as people, that
yeah,
things happen in our past and our generations down and are however, and that actually rears its head in our lives too. So there is scientific proof, because
yeah,
I know a lot of people will think, well, that's not right, but it is. It is true that happens.
yeah.
And if I could switch gears just for a moment, with because I'm still fascinated with these personalities. um, because I could say there's times in my life that I kind of wish that I'd had some of those step in for me.
Right, yeah.
But do you have any like really funny or cool stories that you want to share of maybe they stepped in when maybe it wasn't a trauma, but maybe did they ever step in when like, something was going on at school, or somebody said something, or taking your test for you, maybe they're really 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 good at that. And I think I'll just share everybody. I asked her the other day, I said, so do you have any personalities that are really good at marketing or in doing websites and things, maybe you could utilize those. But she said she didn't, so that's okay.
Well, you know, I had to think about that afterwards. I was like, I don't think, you know what? I did. So the high school that I went to, it was a tech school, and I tested into it, and I tested really high. And so now that when you said that, I was like, I wonder if it was one of them that tested, because I am not tech anything, and it was a tech school, and I tested really high. I got right out of the program because I couldn't handle the program. It was like too much for me. So I wonder now, like once you said
Yeah.
that the other day, I was like, I wonder if they took that test for me, because I'm not techie at all, and I'm not a good test taker at all. So it probably was. I can say that a lot of my confidence a lot of the times comes from a different personality. So like I love to sing. I was always like on stage singing and stuff like that. And I can honestly remember like there was always a moment like right before I would go on stage where there was a feeling of a change. I didn't understand, I guess, what it was, but there was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a feeling of a change. And the adrenaline probably kicked that in, you know what I mean? Because now
Yeah.
that I look at it like physiologically, like what happens to my body when I start to, it is an extra influx of adrenaline will kick in another, someone other than me, because the fight or flight automatically like comes with that adrenaline,
Mm-hmm.
good or bad, it just kind of kicks up. It's in the same area in my body. So they probably have come in lots of times where there's good moments, but it's so interesting because most of the time I don't think I really fully appreciate the moment because it's not me. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So like, oh, I did this, but it wasn't really me. And so I did a lot of stage stuff, and I would say that that's probably like my happiest moments were like I love to be on stage, and but then probably there was someone like that was stepping in for me. But most of the time when they step in, it's kind of more for protection, not
Mm-hmm.
for like the goodness of things. Although I would say that the majority of my high school years and elementary school years, I was in so much fight or flight that like there's just whole chunks that they were a part of that I wasn't a part of,
Right.
And so I don't really know, because I would say like so much of it they're a part of, but there's nothing like that they did that's like seems fun, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, I mean, the 12-year-old, she thinks she's really funny a lot of the time. And yet once I have my son that's 11 now like in his humor, I'm like, oh my gosh, you are not funny. And I'm thinking to myself, that's my 12-year-old. Like, she has a lot of problems with my 11-year-old, a lot, like they bicker a lot, and I have to constantly tell him afterwards, like, I'm so sorry. And he's starting to see it more and more, because he's getting closer to the age, he really triggers her to come out, and she's not funny and he's not funny, because it's like that age is not funny, but they think that they're funny because
Yes,
they're
yes,
12
yes.
and they
I
think that they're
remember
very humorous.
when my children were like 11 years old, they would tell some of the stupidest jokes,
Yeah,
and they would just laugh and laugh. And so you'd have to laugh too, so
yeah,
they really thought they were comedians,
yeah,
but no.
yeah, for sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's her and him, so that makes sense. I mean, he's so much like me, so it makes sense that he triggers all that stuff out of me. But she's probably the one that thinks she's the funniest. So the rest
Yeah.
are not really. They're more, I would say a lot of mine are more serious, and I just think that it's because
The
the
reason that
trauma.
they
Yeah.
appeared,
Now,
right?
yeah, I think that sometimes when they step in, like just because something stepped in, like I've had times like that where I'm a conduit and they just step in for a short amount of time to do something, whatever. Then some of those have been more happy, and like I've been in a really good place. But a lot of that is when I'm in meditation or something. So I'm in a really good headspace.
Mm-hmm.
You're attracting, this is the law of attraction, right? So like you're attracting a being, and if you have to be on the same energy wavelength in them. So if I'm in a meditation and I'm in a good headspace, I'm going to attract something that's like good,
Right.
where like all of mine were attracted in such like dark time.
Darkness.
I think
Yeah.
that most of them are pretty serious, and when they come out, it's more serious because they only really come out to really most of the time because of a trigger and to try to protect me or teach me something. I mean, they have taught me so much now that I know that they're there, and I know all this stuff. Like they teach me so much, especially the 12-year-old with my 11-year-old. It's like she's talking and she says stuff, and I'm just like, okay, you have to stop. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, you have to stop because you're being too hard on him, and I need to like somehow step in, and sometimes it's really hard. I have to like walk away, try to like calm her down and get myself in a place where I have the control again. For me, looking in the mirror is like the best thing. Like, and I used to never look in the mirror. And like as hairdressers, we look in a mirror all day. I
Mm-hmm.
would never look at myself in it. I would just be doing my hair, whatever, because I couldn't see what was actually there. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
I was blurry almost. Like I only saw the horrible things about myself. I never saw anything good. And so when I really started to heal, a big part of it was just like staring at the mirror and like seeing myself separate from all of these other things. And now I
Mm-hmm.
can really do that. And so like I'll just come in and walk away and have to go stand in the mirror and be like, okay, I'm in charge now. Step down, give me like the time, like let me get untriggered, let me, do the work. Where
Mm-hmm.
before I think I didn't do any work, so they just did it for me.
Yeah.
They'll
So
just
it was
do all of it for
easier
me.
to just kind of
Yes,
relax and let them take over.
absolutely. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, like I would just be gone and be fine, be totally
Yeah.
fine with that. But I didn't really think that they had that much control, I guess, either, or really realize it until, like I said, like me and my husband really started talking about it. It's like, you said this to me. And I'm like, there's no way, I wouldn't say that. You know what I mean? Like, and he's like, but you said it. So like,
Yeah.
here we are. This is where we're at. And so now I have to like really make sure that I have the
Right.
control.
Yeah.
But most of the time, there's nothing like really, I guess, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. For me, there's not a lot of funness when they're around. It's kind of more like, leave me alone. Let me do it now,
Yeah.
because they've done it for so long.
Well, I can understand the relaxing and just letting them take over, because to be perfectly honest with you, most of the time as people, we take the path of least resistance, because it's a lot of work to do all of this inner work. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have as much trauma as you do, to do the
Yeah.
inner work can sometimes be very confronting and painful.
Yeah.
And so that's why not everybody does it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I know you work with people with um, different, from sexual abuse and with trauma and everything. And so you actually have a coaching business, basically, where you work with people on all those things. So if someone that's watching this is having some resonance with what you're saying, whether it's the sexual abuse, just the trauma, or the DID, or whatever it may be, how would they reach out to you?
Usually like through my Instagram or Facebook, and they can instant message me. I don't have a website or anything like that at the moment, because I'm raising like three kids.
Right.
So I'm really,
So would that be just be Breanne? How are you listed in those two places to
Facebook
connect?
is Breanne Peltier Moore, and Peltier is Peltier. And Facebook is my infertility journey. So
Okay,
that's what that is. And yeah, I mostly I only work with women. Oh, you heard him.
that's
Uh,
okay.
I only work with women because for me that's the safest. Like I
Hmm.
still have to
Well,
really protect my boundaries and my safety.
yeah.
So I only work with women, and I I'm usually attracted to women, or they come into my my realm of work for fertility most of the time,
Hmm.
because trauma a lot of times will cause infertility, and we don't talk about that. The fertility doctors don't talk about it. I went through IVF to have my first one, and they didn't talk about that at all. They're just like, oh, you could have this, and you have this, and you have this, but they don't talk about, well, sorry.
It's okay. Do you need to let him in?
Yeah, I might need to. Hold
Yeah,
on.
that's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's
My
okay.
oldest, my oldest took him. So I usually work with women who have some kind of fertility issue and also have trauma, because there's not really anyone doing that. Like, you can go to a therapist and talk about your trauma, but until you put the two together of, this is the space that the trauma happened in, and then I'm trying to now create a baby in that space, and that space has an energy from the trauma, and you haven't removed that energy from the trauma, you haven't allowed your body to heal energetically, by going in and doing the work, because like you said, a lot of people don't like to do the work. Fertility doctor's easier, like, oh, just go
Yeah,
to the fertility
yeah.
doctor, have them do all the medicine. But when I was going through that, my fertility doctor was actually a very good one, and he recommended that I go to a Chinese doctor and do some acupuncture. And when I did the acupuncture, he looked at me and he goes, that you're, and he had a very strong accent, that your infertility is not physical, it's mental. And that was the first time I had ever put the two and two together, that, oh my goodness, because I haven't dealt with my trauma. It's because I haven't went through it. Now I knew physically it had caused damage. Like I
Mm-hmm.
had lots of, you know, scar tissue and stuff like that, but they had dealt with all of that. And so that wasn't still causing it. It was mental. It was that I was blocking myself from getting pregnant. I had for so many years told myself, you cannot get pregnant because I was being abused, and you
Mm-hmm.
cannot have a baby. You cannot do it. You cannot, do not get pregnant. That I had put up so many blocks, you know? And most women don't think about that. They don't think, oh, well, like I was sexually abused. And at that time, you were probably scared to death that maybe you would get pregnant, and you wished, you hoped that you weren't. Well, that created a block that we now have to go in and heal and work through. So that's the kind of work that I usually do, is with women that have went through trauma, and they hold it in their womb, and they just need to go and remove that trauma so that they can call in, you know, a baby, and that that soul has a residence. Because if there is the spark of light, and that's when the soul is connected, and you have all that trauma in there, then that baby is being called in. The baby that's being called in is saying, okay, I want that trauma because that's what I resonate with, which is fine. And there's a purpose to it. Like we're all born for a reason, but it's better if you work through all that trauma beforehand so that the baby doesn't
Right.
have to go through the same pattern that you have went through, you know? And so that's what we do. We just go through and heal all of that trauma first. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I've done it twice myself, and so it's a really beautiful thing to go through, and to help women, you know, find that power inside themselves to go,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can control this. There's so many things in our lives, and fertility is one where like you feel like you have no control over it, but you do have some control. And so we really work on giving them back that control of going, I'm powerful. Like my body was made to do this. I am powerful. And the people that hurt me don't have that power. I have the power. And so I'm very passionate about that and working with women for that, because my last two, that's how they were conceived. Like I didn't go through IVF or anything to have them. And it's been a total blessing. And so I'd love to share it with women.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's amazing. And I wonder, um, there's a lot of women that may not have the same kind of sexual trauma that you have, but maybe they've had something that it manifests almost in the same way in
Mm-hmm.
the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And so that trauma, the infertility may come from another kind of trauma that is
Yes.
just put there.
Yeah.
So
Any kind of trauma.
yeah, so it's not like anybody that's has infertility that, they that if they know they didn't have any sexual trauma that this isn't going to work. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
releasing that. And really, and it's kind of interesting. I'm doing a course right now, and the part of the course that I was just listening to right before we got on here was all about how we hold a disconnect in our womb, and that can disconnect us from making money, from making better relationships, from infertility. And there's so many different things that just holding that space. And because women typically are taught that the womb space and having your period and all these different things are like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I mean, because if you even like in the Old Testament of the Bible, it was like you're unclean, and you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't men were not allowed to touch their wives or sit on a piece of furniture that a woman that was bleeding had been on. I mean,
Yeah.
if that doesn't put some generational trauma into you,
Mm-hmm.
it's like and it's mind-boggling to think of. And I think one of the wonderful things about the work that you're doing and this newer generation really is that they're more open to looking at it as, this is part of the process of my body. And it's not, it may be painful, but it's pushing me into a new birth of myself. And they're able to look at it in a different way than, say, for me, when I was younger, it was like, I mean, you didn't even want to talk about it at school because
Yeah.
somebody might say, you could say, I'm on my period.
Yeah.
Get a tampon. You could
Yeah.
not, I mean, it was not, you even hid the tampon or the pad, you know, to go
Mhm.
to the bathroom or anything because it was like a bad thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think we hold a lot of trauma from even that stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, that's one of the first questions I ask my clients is, what was your first period experience? Because if you had a bad first period experience, let me tell you, you are holding trauma inside, because if you were shamed or you felt shame or you hated it, you're holding that inside of you, you know? And if you like don't like it, then how are you, if you don't like your period is creation, it is
Right.
creation, you know, that energy is so powerful. And if you don't like it, then how are you going to use it? You know, you, if you're not
Right.
using, if you hate everything about it, then how are you going to use that power? And I started my period when I was 8 years old.
I started
So
when I was 9.
yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was sent all over. Like I thought I was dying. I was on the toilet. My parents were out in Hawaii. My grandma came in and she would hysterically started crying. It was very traumatic
Oh,
experience, right?
wow.
Did I ever want to have my period again? No. I had my period until I was about 16. And then at 16, I mentally, I think, did a very good job at saying, I'm not having it anymore. And for years, I didn't have it
Wow.
because I put a block, because it
Mm-hmm.
was such a horrible experience. It was so traumatic, you know? And
Now for
we do
me,
that.
when I started, I was 9, but my mom, bless her, had taken my sister and I to these classes, and it was all about your period and where babies came
Uh-huh.
from, and you know, and
Uh-huh.
I don't even know where it was that she took us to these classes, so I kind of understood what it was. And I'll be honest, when I started my period, I was proud. I
Oh,
thought I
yes.
was a woman, you know.
Yes. Well, and
Yeah,
that's how
this
it
means
should
I'm a
be.
woman now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how it should be. It should be celebrated. And yet,
Yeah.
for most people, it's
Mm-hmm.
not celebrated. For most women, and you're lucky your mom, like, she was on it. She
Yeah,
saw,
yeah.
she knew.
Now I did get the, you know, the shame with it as I got older, you
Yes.
know, but at that point, and I was really proud that nobody else was having their period. None of my friends, you know.
Yeah.
I was so blessed. I was so grown.
Yeah. Oh, see, I was hiding it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is mortifying. I don't want anyone to know. You know, it was definitely like just so shameful. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women are like that. They hate it. They hate every month. I am now like, oh my gosh, like I'm 44 and I still have a period. Yes, yeah, hallelujah. Like the longer the better, because that is life. That is, you know, I don't know why women want to get rid of it. I don't know why they don't like it is creation at its finest. And most women don't accept that. Most women just think it's just this thing that they have to go through that's so and once we change our mindset on that, that helps fertility a great amount. You can't
Yeah.
expect your body to do something like create a baby when you hate everything about it that has to happen. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have to appreciate all the steps. And so that's one of the very first questions that I ask. And then also like all of your like sexual encounters, because sometimes it's not obviously rape or anything like that, but sometimes you just didn't want to.
Right.
And that just not wanting to can create, you know, a block there and cause like, you know, you to have a hard time. And so we break down all of those experiences and
Mm-hmm.
learn to look at them in a different way so that the mind is not putting up these heavy blocks. And it's a beautiful thing. Like I think that all women should, like, when you start your period, it should be a big celebration. It should be
Mm-hmm.
this great and wonderful thing. And if I ever have a daughter, that's what it would be like. I would be
Right.
so happy and be like, yeah, you know. And
Let's go dance under the moon.
yeah, exactly. Like, yes, you are, you know, obviously now you're capable of having a baby, so you might, you know, be careful. But you're, you know, this is a humongous key to who we are. And when we take
Mm-hmm.
away that, then we're no different than men, really, right? And so then what we don't have that creation, and that is just way powerful. And tapping into that energy is the best thing that you could do, I think,
Yes.
as a woman. And tapping into that every month, like it's so powerful. I didn't do that for years, and then the second I did, my life shifted in such a humongous way that there's no way that I'll ever look back and go, oh, I hate having my period, even though it does kind of, now I'm like dreading like when it stops. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't want to go through menopause. Like I need this. I'm planning on going for till I'm 60 with no, like without going through menopause, because it's really good for your body. You know,
Right.
like here we are taking birth control to stop it and do all these things, like, you know, the pill to stop it and everything. And yet your body really needs it. You know,
Right.
you need those
Well, I
hormones.
had a hysterectomy. Let's see, how old is my daughter? So 26 years ago, I had a hysterectomy. I had some different issues and everything they had to take care of, but I still have my ovaries. So I still have those feelings of everything that happens, even after all this time. It's not as intense,
Yeah.
but so I feel like even, you know, even though because I have my ovaries, I feel like it's still doing part of its thing. You know, there's
Yeah.
that dance, you know,
Yes.
and I can always tell, you know, when it's time because I get a little moody and you know, and I can still have some little aches and stuff. So but I've stopped looking at it as a, oh my God, I can't believe, you know. But I will say I did that way a lot, especially when I was a teenager and everything,
Yes.
because it was a major inconvenience,
Yes,
you know?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. And then we don't realize that our thoughts and our words, right? They create, they
Yeah.
create. And I did that for years. I wished I didn't have one. And then all of a sudden I didn't have one. And then I was okay with not having one during that time. You know, I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And oh, I'm not gonna get pregnant. That's great, you know. And but then it's like, oh, I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want to get pregnant. I don't want, and then when you want to, you've now created this whole pathway where your body's like, no, I didn't
Yeah.
want to.
Ain't
And now you
happening.
have to reprogram it. You
Yeah.
know, now you
Yeah.
have to go back and say, no, I do want to. And so a lot of the fertility stuff is that is just reprogramming, you know,
Yeah.
and healing, just like a deep, deep heal. Like even if you have a mom wound, that
Yeah.
will go because you were connected through the umbilical cord to her uterus. You will have that, you know. So we got to clear up those mom wounds. We got to clear up all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I mean, we didn't even talk about any of this, you know, last time
I
we
know.
talked. So this is pretty interesting. I love it. Um, and then I know you are an Ayurveda, and
Mm-hmm.
I will say that after this, I don't want to pick your brain now, but I'm a tridosha. And so I get really confused with, you know, as a tridosha, you know, what am I supposed to be doing with different things? So I'll pick your brain about all that. But
Yeah,
you know, can
that's
you
a hard
just
one.
a little quick thing for people that are not familiar with Ayurveda, what it is and how is that beneficial to know what your dosha is and that kind of thing?
Well, your dosha, so it's a medicine from India, very similar to Chinese medicine. You know, it's just it's their old medicine, and it all has to do with your, like you said, your doshas, which are properties of the universe, right? So you have fire, earth, wind. So your body holds certain doshas, and it's all about balancing them. All three should be balanced. So like, even though you're all three, if one is out of whack, then that one's in control, right, of your system. Then you have to like do things to mitigate that one so that all three are equal. We're usually born with one very, very dominant. And I'm a kapha, which is like a pretty heavy set, solid earth grounding one. So for me, grounding comes very easily, but then I'm blocked, right? Because my whole entire sacral area was so blocked that I would hold all my grounding from my feet to, you know, like my tailbone forever. And so it's all about learning how, like diet, the elements outside, like everything affects your body, right? So like if it's wintertime and I'm a kapha, which is also very cold, and the winter is very cold, it's the worst time for me, right? Because now I have so much extra dampness and coldness in my body, and I have to mitigate that with like warmth and very light food. Where a lot of people think during the winter they should eat like really heavy and dense like food. That's actually opposite for me. Like I should eat really like salads, but warm salads, you know what I mean? So it's all about health in the way of like a full spectrum. I'm sorry, he's totally screaming.
It's okay. If you need to bring him in and sit him in your lap to, you know,
Okay, yeah, let me
you're
get
welcome to
done.
do that. All right, she's going to go get him. For those of you who are listening and can't see anything. Bless his little heart.
Okay, can you sit on my lap? Can you sit on Mommy's lap?
Hello. Oh, look at those beautiful curls. What's his name?
His name is, well, his nickname is Ham. His name is Harland, but his nickname is Ham.
Ham?
Yeah,
Hi, Ham. Can you wave?
Hi.
Can you say hi? No, you're just too upset.
Yeah, he's upset.
It's okay. He wanted his mommy.
His brothers are not letting him do what he wants to do. He's very he's very much the one that's in charge because he's the youngest.
Yes. So are you okay with continuing just for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking about the Ayurveda, and like I said, I can understand some of those things. I've studied some Ayurveda. I am not certified in it or anything like that because it was just for me.
Yeah.
But when I get confused is because, like I said, I'm a tridosha. So when I have certain things happening, like if I'm feeling like my body's hot, I know I need to do something that's more of a cooling. So I have like different teas that I can do for different things. But it's like, because they're all so like, I don't have one that's more dominant than the other. My test, I was, just kind of balanced in all of them. So sometimes I feel off, but I'm really not sure how to fix it, is basically what happens with me.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's not just the test. There's actually a pulse test that we can do.
Okay.
To see where you're jumping, where your pulse is jumping, because that means a certain dosha.
Okay.
Sometimes you need more intense, checkup, like workup to find out what you really are, because a lot of times you would be very much dominant in one. Even if you're tri, there would be one that's dominant. Do you want to sip the water? One that's dominant. But a lot of times it's just that your body, it also has seasons. So the thing about Ayurveda that gets kind of confusing is that it's not just about your body, it's also about outside and the season of your life. Mm-hmm. So if your age depends on what season you're in. So you're probably in the Vata season. And so your body will have more wind and more ether, they say. So your thoughts are usually more pronounced or more deep, usually have a wake up time that's during the Vata time, and Vata time is early in the morning, like at 3:00 in the morning. So it all goes, if you pick your dosha and then you look at the time of the year, that one, if you're tridosha, you'll probably be dominant in whatever time of the year it is or the time of your life it is.
All right, that makes sense.
Because those also play factors. So it's not just about you personally, it's also about your everything that you take in. In Ayurveda, it's everything. It's not just, your food, it's your environment, it's what you watch, it's what you listen to. Everything pertains to that. So if you're in a certain time in your life, they have cycles. So from this age to this age is kapha, and this age, so a baby is a kapha, right? Because they need to build and grow, and they need that time. So their system's going to be really big on heavy, dense things. And so during that time of their life, they're really growing. Where later on in life, you're actually should lose weight. In your Vata time, your body should be coming.
So what age kind of is Vata time?
It's usually everyone is so different because of pre-existing conditions. Okay. But usually it's in your 50s and going older. Okay. That your body starts to go through that time period. And then, like I said, so time every day, Vata time is in the middle of the night and early morning. So then a lot of times for older people, start to wake up really early and in the morning, because that's their time. You know what I mean? That's their body's clock. That's how it works. So
that's when I have to get up and go to the bathroom.
Well, that a lot of times.
And then I go back to bed.
Like that. Yeah, something like that. You know what I mean? They also call that the witching time and all those kind of things, right? Because that's also when the veil is very thin and anything can come through. but that's the same thing. The ether is where everything is happening, right? So that time of day, then that time, the season. So fall is the time, like the end of summer to fall is the Vata time, because there's more wind, right? It's more of a windy time. So that time everything is moving. So it's all about mitigating whatever comes up, be based on all of those circumstances. So it's very in depth. I never went on further than a counselor, because to me it was so intense that
Right.
it's kind of like something that you have to go, oh, I'm going to go all in on this, and like that's all I'm going to follow. And I wasn't like, oh, that's all I'm going to follow. Like I want to use this, sure, like the herbs and like, you know, some of the remedies and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I believe in that kind of stuff, but then some of it to keep going was just, it's just so intense. Like I
Right.
also want to bring in, like, you know, my side, my Native American side, and
Yes.
you wouldn't intermix all those things, you know what I mean? You would just do Ayurveda, because it's just, it's
I
so in
know.
depth.
That's why I said I've studied it for myself, you know, and I
Yeah.
have some books on it, and I have, you know, all kinds of things. But it's like, to me, it's like everything, you know, there's a, everything has a time and a place. So there's times in my life that I start going, you know, toward the Ayurveda look things, and then I go to something else. And you know, so it's really intriguing. And I think when you can get more well-rounded and not just so pigeonholed, and I know that works for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
it doesn't for me, because I guess I'm just multi-curious about everything. So you
Yeah.
mentioned your indigenous roots. So you moved to Oklahoma, right? To get in touch with it. So how's that been for you?
Well, we've been here a year, and I mean, my life blew up the second we moved here, and we knew, just like in Utah, we knew that we were coming here for a reason. Um, my great grandpa was from here, and he left because he was kicked off the reservation, and he left. It was very traumatic, and so when we started trying to decide we were going to come, we were praying like, where are we moving next? Because we knew Utah was not for us. We My great grandpa came to me and he was like, "You're moving to Oklahoma," which I laughed at the time, because he never said one nice thing about Oklahoma. He always talked about how horrible it was. And it was like, I'm not, why would I move to Oklahoma? You always said how it was really bad. And I was like, okay, you know, you come to me for a reason, so I'll do it. And my husband was like totally on it, like, okay, let's try it, let's go. And we moved here, and it's been, you feel it if you do ancestral work and you go to where your ancestors were from. You feel something completely different than just being anywhere, you know what I mean? Because you can
Right.
connect to all them. I right away connected to my grandpa in ways, and my great grandpa in ways that I had never connected before. I learned, so I'm learning, I'm taking the language, which, oh my goodness, is so hard. I'm taking a language class. I've going to the reservation. These things that, like, my grandpa was so against. He went to one of the Catholic, you know, schools that they sent them to, and he left. He ran away because he saw, you know, some bad things happening, and he went back home. And when he went back home, his mom had died, and he was a young kid. His dad had remarried, and they didn't like him, so they kicked him out of the house. And he was like, I think around 15 or so. There's so many different stories, you know, how you get that generation after generation. Yeah. And he started bootlegging, and so they kicked him off the reservation. And he came to California and ran stuff for the mob, I guess. I don't know, a crazy life, but there's a lot of trauma there. And so I've really been helping connect the trauma from that, from his life, and his my great, his mom, which is one of my walk-ins, she never, they don't know where she's buried. And so, sorry.
It's okay.
So I've been tasked with trying to find her gravesite in Oklahoma, for like all of my ancestors, and for my great grandpa. He wants it found and put a headstone on. And so I've been doing that, and I'm learning a lot. It's definitely different. Hey, stop. It's definitely different than California or Utah. But I have a feeling here that I haven't had anywhere else. So it's great, because I know that I'm connecting to a community that like needs to be connected to.
It's okay. Don't worry about that.
Sorry.
Well, a lot of this is going to be audio. Some
Yeah.
of it's going to be video. So a
Yeah.
lot of people don't even know that her little guy is flipping the little light
Turning
on
on and off. Yeah.
on, I guess it is your ring light,
Yeah.
because it's all different shades. So
Uh-huh.
it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Sir, we just turn the light on. Yeah, so it's been good. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work here. I know that I'm here for a reason. Like I said, my life kind of blew up here, which is normal for me. Like when I start doing this work, you know, there has to be like some crack open event for me to like really heal stuff. And so that happened here, and we're working through it. We're healing, and it's pretty. I wouldn't change it at the time. I think I'll probably stay in Oklahoma, to be honest, but so far we love it. And the indigenous, like, there's so much trauma there that I'm happy to like work through that with the people that I have met, and I'm learning a lot. So that's
So you
great.
said it was your grandfather that was, or your great grandfather that
My
was on
great
the
grandfather.
great
Yeah.
grandfather. Okay.
And the interesting thing is, I have these memories of my great grandfather, and he's was a very quiet man, didn't say a lot, drank a lot. You know, the very typical "we are all alcoholics because we're Native American" was our family. You
Yeah.
know, like, but they got off of the he got off of the reservation and really made a name for himself, and did a lot of things that, you know, like at that time you didn't say you were Native American, you know, like you weren't, we never acted like we were, we never, you know, like there was nothing like that, because he didn't want to be associated with it because it was like such a bad thing during that time.
Yeah.
And so that makes me sad now, like seeing all the things that here, like the chairman of my tribe is my grandpa's cousin. And so it's kind of sad, because I think like, oh, my grandpa would have, like, my not my great grandpa, but my grandpa would have really enjoyed this, but he's not around anymore, and he didn't get to go do any of this stuff because there was so much, you know, not wanting to be that way, not wanting to be Native, wanting to be white, like don't act like you are, you know, anything like
I think that happens with a lot of nationalities, you know, that they try to get away from their roots so that they're not perceived as less
a
than.
certain way. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, he went to the boarding schools, and it was like, you cannot be this. Like, he comes from medicine people. You cannot be a medicine. Like, that's evil and bad and whatever. So he wasn't allowed to do any of that stuff, even though that was who he was. Then that's what he was. So he walked away from it all. I mean, as a young teenager, because he had to. Like, they didn't really have a choice. But then as he was older, he didn't want to come back or do like really any of it. You know, he didn't want to be associated with it really at all, because there was just too much, you know, hurt. And I understand that, but I know that he's very happy that I'm back now, and that I'm, you know, I'm in the space where I can like, he's like, I'm so done with this.
Yeah. Well, we'll close up pretty quick for you. How about that, Ham? Is that good?
Yeah, I fit my name pretty well, trust me. Yeah. So yeah, so it's been a great experience. I'm lucky enough that we're able to do, you know, this kind of thing where we can go, okay, where are we supposed to go next, and what do we need to do next, and we just do it because that's what we feel guided to do. People think that we're crazy a lot of times.
I really admire that, because I will say I live in the same area, not too far from where I was born. And other than we moved away a couple of times when I was young, it was to help my grandfather or something. And then we moved back, and most of my family still lives in this area. And my daughter, who's an adult, she's moved away a few times, just willy-nilly, just moved and stayed somewhere and then came back and then went somewhere. And I've always admired that spirit in her, because I don't know why, but I never, ever in my wildest dreams thought that was a possibility. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That I never thought it was a possibility to move to another state or anything like that. It just,
Like you had to stay.
yeah. And I love my family, you know, they're all close by and I see them all the time and talk to them. And, you know, so it's a wonderful thing when you can get the calling that you want to go to this place and you just feel like, oh, yeah. So I admire that in you.
It's
Yeah.
scary. I mean, we're in Oklahoma and we're the only ones here, you know. So when me and my husband like separated while we were here, it was like we have no one. We're just doing this on our own, and which is kind of liberating at the same time because no one can control how you're going to. You know, I'm so used to being controlled for so many years, and no one could control how I was going to go through this. You know, my mom did a very good job of helping me all the time. You know, to stay in that state of not remembering or not wanting to heal. And since she's in Utah and I'm here, I really was able to like go, okay, no, I'm not gonna stay in that. I'm gonna move.
I just saw this vision of opening the floodgates.
That's exactly what happens.
We
drove out of Utah and there was like a sign that says you're in Colorado, and it was like this whole thing just went over me, and it all like just stayed there. All that trauma that I had dealt with and healed stayed there, and I left it. And now I'm moving on to the next trauma.
Perfect.
You know, and I'll be okay. I'll work through it. And so it will be interesting to see where we might go next, because I have no idea. It would have to be somewhere like in New England area, because that's where my ancestors came from, you know, further than that. So it's like we just might just keep trekking until we like do it all. But it's a really interesting and fun experience, I think. And we're lucky enough, blessed enough that we're like, this is what we need to do for ourselves. People don't understand it all. They're like, why would you leave California to go to Utah? And then now they look at me and they're like, you live in Oklahoma on like, why would you move to Oklahoma on a ranch? Like, you were a hairdresser and you're not like at all like that. But, you know, we change, we grow.
Yeah, we all change. I mean, and it's like, just because you perceive me as being one way doesn't mean that that's who I am.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I did a really good job of like hiding who I really was for all those years, you know? So the real me wants to be like, you know, very simple, and actually needs it to be very simple in order to be out all the time. Like the chaos, the other ones get to survive in that and they get to live in that. And if I want to be my true self, I have to have like to be very simple, you know, in order to make it through it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you've got to go and take care of kids and everything, but this has been such a pleasure. And I want to continue conversations with you many, many times. I feel like even though we really don't know each other, but just connecting with you has been such a spiritual connection.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. It's been a great 2 phone calls, and I already feel like, oh my gosh, this is one of the reasons that we were in that group, you know?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Create this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is my first time ever doing something like this and telling my story. There's things that I just said on this podcast that I have never told anyone, maybe except for my husband. So it's scary, but also like so freeing. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to share, so that people could hear, like, you know, and I'm not worried about it. I'm like, okay, whoever hears it, it's okay. Like, they're meant to hear it. So.
Well, the one thing that I hope that people get from this is not only that you can come through trauma and still be a whole person, but that it's okay to open yourself up and speak about things. Because when you're controlled when you were young, it was because nobody talked about it. It was taboo, and it's really easy to sugarcoat things and overlook things when nobody talks about them. So thank you so much for being vulnerable, because that's an amazing vulnerable place that you put yourself in today. And I greatly appreciate you so much. So what is one thing that you can think of right now that you would like to leave people with, a thought, or if there's something that you want them to take away from this more than other things, is what would you say?
I think that something that I've told myself recently a lot is that my trauma is my superpower, and that I chose this as my life path. That means I had to choose the darkness in order to get to this light. Then I chose it all, because that takes away the power of anyone else that had control over me. I did it. I chose it, and it's my superpower, and it's gonna help me get through anything, and it's gonna help other people get through things. So if you have trauma, I think that if you just start to look at it in a way that is empowering, and like what you went through, yes, you went through horrible things, but you overcame so much. You are still alive, which means if you went through trauma, that's a lot just in itself. Making it day after day after day is a humongous thing, and those things should be celebrated. And most women just, we just try to put it in the back of our head, like, this happened to us, let's never talk about it again. No, talk about it, and so that you feel like you have that power, and then let it go, you know what I mean, so that you're not living in it daily. But talk about it so that you take your power back. And so for me, it's that my trauma is my superpower.
Yes.
And that's how I have to look at it.
And one thing that just popped in my head as you were saying all those things is you said you chose this, and maybe one of the reasons that you chose this was you would be the only one strong enough to bring it to light.
I do feel like that sometimes, because I think that, like, I'm the only one in my family that is willing to, like, go there and go to the darkness and, like, see it and go, okay, this is what happened.
And not only do that, but speak about it in public.
Yeah. And I feel like I have to, like, I feel like my story, like when you messaged and said, I want you to be on my podcast, it's like, yes, because I have to tell my story. I know that that's my purpose, is to tell it, because we need to change the way that we look at it. So many women have went through trauma. I'm not special in that way whatsoever, but it could be my special. Like, it could be that this trauma made me who I am, and I am special. So live it that way, or it could control me, and I choose not to let it control me. I choose to control it. Yes. So superpower all day long, good or bad, like I'm gonna claim it, and yes. I think the more times people claim things, the more they're like, they take their power back. And that's really what it's about. Like, trauma is about someone else having your power, and you saying, nope, I chose this. That's about you having the power. And we all need to have our own superpower.
Yes, I agree.
If I can't fly or whatever.
Well, you might in your dreams, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, so I'm hoping maybe at some point you'll want to be a guest again, but even in between that time and this time and the next time you're a guest, I do hope that you and I can continue to have these conversations, just you and I, because I learned so much from conversations with you, and I definitely want to pick your brain a little bit more about the Ayurveda stuff. So
yeah, no, I would definitely love to come back on and keep going. Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And I wish everybody the opportunity to embrace their superpower and speak up when it's time to speak up.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording now.
All right.